It's April in London and you're having a lovely day out. You put a t-shirt on over your swimsuit and head to Hyde Park for an outdoor swim, followed by a game of croquet with friends. A group of tourists nearby are wearing shorts and enjoying some gelato, while snapping photos of the cherry blossoms in full bloom. This weekend, you'll be going up to Yorkshire to visit your favorite sheep farm and pick up some fresh wool for knitting season. When you get there, you find the farmer standing knee-deep in water trying to rescue his drowned lambs. The soil is too wet for shearing, but it's too warm for the wool to grow. Spring has come early and stayed too long. It's now July, and the heat is unbearable. You hurry home because the train has just announced delays due to storm damage on the line. But as soon as you step off the train at your station, you see that the trees have begun to turn color and fall. Winter has come early and stayed too long. Welcome to our channel. And today we are answering the extraordinary. What if all the seasons disappeared? While our planet's dramatic temperature swings from season to season may seem like a fact of nature, it's really a delicate balance of several well-oiled climate systems working together. In reality, each season depends on the fine balance of several factors, including Earth's wobble on its axis, the shifting of ocean currents, the insulating blanket of our atmosphere, and the distribution of heat across the globe. The seasons we know and depend upon are very much the product of a finely tuned system that has developed over millions of years, but they're not set in stone, and they're certainly not unchanging. Small changes can have major consequences. For example, our planet's current wobble has a tilt of 23.5 degrees. If it were to increase to 24 degrees or decrease to 22 degrees, the resulting change in seasonal temperatures would cause massive disruptions to plant and animal life. But what if we took that idea of a tipping point to the extreme? Let's take a deep dive into what would happen if the seasons as we know them ceased to exist. So first off, let's remove the one thing that most obviously influences our seasons here on Earth: our planet's tilt on its axis. Without this tilt, the sun's rays would consistently hit the same part of our planet throughout the year, giving us consistent temperatures and no variation between the hemispheres. As a result, we'd have one giant and very long growing season. Since sunlight would hit the Earth at the same angle every day, everywhere, in the northern hemisphere, we'd see a gradual 6-hour lengthening of daylight hours from December to June, with the reverse happening in the southern hemisphere. But without a tilt, there would be no temperature difference between summer and winter solstices. And depending on where you live, you might experience either a hot or a dry season, but never a cold one. The other variable that affects our seasons is the Earth's orbit. Because our planet's orbit is slightly elliptical, sometimes it is closer to the sun and sometimes further away. However, the variation in distance doesn't affect the amount of heat received enough to disrupt our usual pattern of seasons. And so we can ignore this factor as well. All of this means that if the Earth lost its tilt and its elliptical orbit, we'd no longer have 4 seasons. Instead, we'd have 2 seasons only. Every place on Earth would experience the same temperature all the time, with the only variations being those caused by local geography and elevation. But wait, there's more. The Earth's axis doesn't just suddenly snap into place pointing exactly north and south. Its wobble is actually a gradual process that happens over thousands of years. And the axis also doesn't always remain perpendicular to the sun. As the Earth wobbles, these two lines intersect at different angles, causing slight variations in the intensity and duration of sunlight reaching our planet. It's this wobbling combined with the Earth's orbit that creates the tilt that causes our seasons. But the wobbling is only about 1 degree, and the tilt is only 23.5 degrees. That means that the angle of the Earth's axis relative to the sun varies by no more than 5 degrees. So what would happen if that changed drastically? If the Earth were to suddenly spin on its axis at a 60-degree angle, our planet would experience extreme temperatures. Each hemisphere would face 6 months each of intense heat, and then 6 months each of intense cold. Summers would be unbearably hot and winters would be hideously cold. And our current weather patterns would cease to exist. Ocean currents would cease to circulate, causing huge regional droughts and floods. But what if the Earth didn't have a set of axes altogether and instead rotated on its orbit around the sun? In this case, one side of the Earth would receive 6 months of sunlight and 6 months of darkness. The resulting temperature swing would be even greater than in the previous example, with temperatures exceeding 50 degrees Celsius in the summer and dropping to minus 50 degrees Celsius in the winter. Most life on Earth would probably die off, but what if instead of removing the axis entirely, it simply shifted gradually? Scientists have suggested that the Earth's tilt has been in a gradual decline since the last ice age and will eventually reach a tipping point. At this point, summers will become hotter and winters will become less cold. It's possible that this shift will eventually make our planet a permanently warmer place. However, until the tilt reaches 22 degrees, it won't be a problem for most people, but it will be devastating for some. Some regions will be hit by unprecedented heat waves, causing serious health problems for people who aren't able to keep cool. Heat stroke, kidney failure, exhaustion, and death will become common occurrences in regions that were previously mild and temperate. Trees would struggle to cope with the changing climate and may begin to die off. Flowering and fruiting would be severely disrupted. Plants would bloom early or too late, missing their preferred temperature window for pollination. Many species would fail to reproduce and populations would crash. Migratory birds would lose their way, and many species would fail to make their breeding grounds in time to lay eggs. Some animals would enter periods of brumation or dormancy during the hottest months of the year, causing even more disruption to their reproductive cycles. Other species wouldn't be able to cope and would migrate to cooler regions or higher altitudes, leading to an ecological catastrophe when they arrive. They would be bringing with them seeds and spores that would have no predators waiting for them in their new territory. The ecosystem upheaval would lead to food shortages and global hunger hotspots. Local extinctions of plants would lead to local extinctions of the animals that ate them. And farming would be thrown into complete chaos. Farmers would follow their traditional planting and harvesting calendars only to find that nothing was ready to harvest when they expected it to be. With no snow to provide the necessary insulation, soil would be washed away by rain and rivers. Floods would destroy crops and make fields too wet for planting. Crops would wither and die on the vine, and farmers would be forced to abandon their fields or change what they grow. Even humans wouldn't be spared from the effects of the collapsing seasons. Global climate migration would occur as people fled areas that became too hot to work or live. Millions of climate refugees would pour into cities already struggling with population density and mass unemployment. Urban infrastructure would be quickly overwhelmed. Public transport would grind to a halt. Schools, hospitals, and shops would be unable to function properly. There would be riots and wars as people fought over resources. Energy systems would also be affected. In summer, air conditioning units would be running overtime, pushing energy grids to their limits. Then in winter, everyone would be frantically turning up their heating in an attempt to stay warm, again, pushing energy grids to their limits. The transportation system would also experience chaos. Roads and railways would be blocked by sudden blizzards or washed away by flash floods and landslides. Air traffic would be severely disrupted by storms, high winds, and thick fog. Ports and harbors would struggle to operate with ships unable to dock safely or move goods. This loss of predictability would feed a dangerous feedback loop. As temperatures rose, permafrost in the Arctic and subarctic regions would thaw. As it thawed, it would release methane into the atmosphere, which would trap more heat and cause even more thawing. As polar ice melted, the darker ocean underneath would absorb more heat, and the planet would continue to warm. If we imagine this cycle continuing until it becomes the new norm, what would our world look like? Well, probably not a world anyone would want to live in. Seasons drive much of our culture, economy, and traditions. Losing them would completely change the way we live. Agriculture would be completely reorganized around whatever arbitrary calendar humans decided to adopt. We would need to rewrite all of our history books as references to seasons would no longer apply. Birds would lose their migratory instincts and would fly in circles or just stop flying altogether. Decades of breeding programs would be needed to create breeds of livestock and crops that could survive in a world without seasons, and many species would just die out. However, life would still go on. It's easy to imagine a world without seasons as total chaos. But life finds a way to adapt. Even in the harshest environments on Earth, life finds a way to thrive. Humans would need to learn to live in a world of constant unpredictability, but we are a highly adaptable species and we would rise to the challenge. We've survived worse. We'd have to work hard to make sure no one froze or roasted to death. But we'd do it. Just as we've done every time the world has changed before us, there are some things that we could do to mitigate the worst effects of a world without seasons. Scientists are working on creating crops that can grow anywhere and withstand anything. Genetically modified plants could mean that we could produce our own food no matter what the weather is doing outside. City planners could build cities that can adapt quickly to changing weather conditions, keeping us cool when it's hot and warm when it's cold. And if all of humanity really tried, we could cut carbon emissions so much that we could slow down the wobbling of the Earth's axis and bring back the seasons as we know them. But until that happens, we're in for a bumpy ride.